The general consensus among Egyptologists is that the ancient Egyptians did not venture far beyond their borders. First of all, it was difficult, with wide, waterless deserts to the west and east, cataracts that made the Nile unnavigable just south of Aswan, and the Mediterranean Sea to the north. The Egyptians were not known as great sailors because they did not need to be. The Nile was a generally tranquil river, and Egypt's more venturesome neighbors were happy to cross the Mediterranean to trade with them. Thus, the Egyptians never developed much in the way of an ocean-going navy. When they did conquer adjacent areas such as the Levant, it was usually in response to an invasion and was done in order to secure their homeland. A few researchers, however, have challenged this consensus and have theorized that the Egyptians explored and perhaps even colonized along the North African and East African coasts and perhaps into Europe. Some have even claimed they made it to the New World. They have provided a large amount of rather dubious evidence to support this. On April 5, 1909, the Arizona Gazette published this odd article. Explorations in Grand Canyon. Mysteries of immense rich cavern being brought to light. Jordan is enthused. Remarkable finds indicate ancient people migrated from Orient. The latest news of the progress of the explorations of what is now regarded by scientists as not only the oldest archaeological discovery in the United States, but one of the most valuable in the world, which was mentioned some time ago in the Gazette, was brought to the city yesterday by G.E. Kincaid, the explorer who found the great underground citadel of the Grand Canyon during a trip from Green River, Wyoming, down the Colorado in a wooden boat to Yuma several months ago. According to the story related to the Gazette by Mr. Kincaid, the archaeologists of the Smithsonian Institute, which is financing the expeditions, have made discoveries which almost conclusively prove that the race which inhabited this mysterious cavern, hewn in solid rock by human hands, was of Oriental origin, possibly from Egypt, tracing back to Ramses. If their theories are borne out by the translation of the tablets engraved with hieroglyphics, the mystery of the prehistoric peoples of North America, their ancient arts, who they were and whence they came, will be solved. Egypt and the Nile and Arizona and the Colorado will be linked by a historical chain running back to the ages which will stagger the wildest fancy of the fictionist. A thorough examination. Under the direction of Professor S.A. Jordan, the Smithsonian Institute is now engaging in the most thorough explorations, which will be continued until the last link in the chain is forged. Nearly a mile underground, about 1,480 feet below the surface, the long main passage has been delved into to find another mammoth chamber from which radiates scores of passageways, like the spokes of a wheel. Several hundred rooms have been discovered, reached by passageways running from the main passage, one of them having been explored for 854 feet and another for 634 feet. The recent finds includes articles which have never been known as native to this country and doubtless had their origin in the Orient. War weapons, copper instruments, sharp-edged and hard as steel, indicate the high state of civilization reached by these strange people. So interested have the scientists become that preparations are being made to equip the camp for extensive studies, and the force will be increased to 30 or 40 persons. Mr. Kincaid's report. Mr. Kincaid was the first white child born in Idaho and has been an explorer and hunter all his life, having been in the service of the Smithsonian Institute for 30 years. Even briefly recounted, his history sounds fabulous, almost grotesque. First, I would impress that the cavern is nearly inaccessible. The entrance is 1,486 feet down the sheer canyon wall. It is located on a government land, and no visitor will be allowed there under penalty of trespass. The scientists wish to work unmolested, without fear of archaeological discoveries being disturbed by curio or relic hunters. A trip there would be fruitless, and the visitor would be sent on his way. The story of how I found the cavern has been related, but in a paragraph. I was journeying down the Colorado River in a boat, alone, looking for mineral. Some 42 miles up the river from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon, I saw on the east walls stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. There was no trail to this point, but I finally reached it with great difficulty. Above a shelf which hid it from view from the river was the mouth of the cave. There are steps leading from this entrance some 30 yards to what was, at the time the cavern was inhabited, the level of the river. When I saw the chisel marks on the wall inside the entrance, I became interested. Securing my gun and went in. During that trip, I went back several hundred feet along the main passage till I came to the crypt in which I discovered the mummies. One of these I stood up and photographed by flashlight. I gathered a number of relics, which I carried down the Colorado to Yuma, from whence I shipped them to Washington with details of the discovery. Following this, the explorations were undertaken. The passages. The main passageway is about 12 feet wide, narrowing to 9 feet toward the further end. About 57 feet from the entrance, the first side's passages branch off to the right and left, along which, on both sides, are a number of rooms about the size of ordinary living rooms of today, though some are 30 by 40 square feet. These are entered by oval-shaped doors and are ventilated by round air spaces through the walls into the passages. The walls are about 3 feet 6 inches in thickness. The passages are chiseled or hewn as straight as could be laid out by an engineer. The ceilings of many of the rooms converge to a center. The side passages near the entrance run at a sharp angle from the main hall, but toward the rear they gradually reach a right angle in direction. The shrine. Over 100 feet from the entrance is the cross hall, several hundred feet long, in which are found the idol, or image of the people's god, sitting cross-legged with a lotus flower or lily in each hand. The cast of the face is oriental, and the carving this cavern. The idol almost resembles Buddha, though the scientists are not certain as to what religious worship it represents. Taking into consideration everything found thus far, it is possible that this worship most resembles the ancient people of Tibet. Surrounding this idol are smaller images, some very beautiful in form, others crooked-necked and distorted shapes, symbolical, probably of good and evil. There are 2 large cacti with protruding arms, one on each side of the dais on which the god squats. All of this is carved out of hard rock, resembling marble. In the opposite corner of this cross hall were found tools of all descriptions, made of copper. These people undoubtedly knew the lost art of hardening this metal, which has been sought by chemicals for centuries without result. On a bench running around the workroom was some charcoal and other material probably used in the process. There is also slag and stuff similar to mate, showing that these ancients smelted ores, but so far no trace of where or how this was done has been discovered, nor the origin of the ore. Among the other finds are vases or urns and cups of copper and gold made very artistic in design. The pottery work includes enameled ware and glazed vessels. Another passageway leads to granaries, such as are found in the Oriental temples. They contain seeds of various kinds. One very large storehouse has not yet been entered, as it is 12 feet high and can be reached only from above. 2 copper hooks extend on the edge, which indicates that some sort of ladder was attached. These granaries are rounded, as the materials of which they are constructed, I think, is a very hard cement. A gray metal is also found in this cavern, which puzzles the scientists, for its identity has not been established. It resembles platinum, strewn promiscuously over the floor everywhere, or what people call cat's eyes, a yellow stone of no great value. Each one is engraved with the head of the Malay type. The hieroglyphics. On all the urns, or walls over doorways, and tablets of stone which were found by the image are the mysterious hieroglyphics, the key to which the Smithsonian Institute hopes yet to discover. The engraving on the tables probably has something to do with the religion of the people. Similar hieroglyphics have been found in southern Arizona. Among the pictorial writings, only 2 animals are found. One is of a prehistoric type. The crypt. The tomb or crypt in which the mummies were found is one of the largest of the chambers, the walls slanting back at an angle of about 35 degrees. On these are tiers of mummies, each one occupying a separate hewn shelf. At the head of each is a small bench, on which is found copper cups and pieces of broken swords. Some of the mummies are covered with clay, and all are wrapped in a black fabric. The urns or cups on the lower tiers are crude, while as the higher shelves are reached, the urns are finer in design, showing a later stage of civilization. It is worthy of note that all the mummies examined so far have proved to be male, no children or females being buried here. This leads to the belief that this exterior section was the warriors' barracks. Among the discoveries, no bones of animals have been found, no skins, no clothing, no bedding. Many of the rooms are bare but for water vessels. One room, about 40 by 700 feet, was probably the main dining hall, for cooking utensils are found here. What these people lived on is a problem, though it is presumed that they came south in the winter and farmed in the valleys, going back north in the summer. Upwards of 50,000 people could have lived in the caverns comfortably. One theory is that the present Indian tribes found in Arizona are descendants of the serfs or slaves of the people which inhabited the cave. Undoubtedly, a good many thousands of years before the Christian era, a people lived here which reached a high stage of civilization. The chronology of human history is full of gaps. Professor Jordan is much enthused over the discoveries and believes that the find will prove of incalculable value in archaeological work. One thing I have not spoken of may be of interest. There is one chamber of the passageway to which is not ventilated, and when we approached it, a deadly, snaky smell struck us. Our light would not penetrate the gloom, and until stronger ones are available, we will not know what the chamber contains. Some say snakes, but others boo-hoo this idea and think it may contain a deadly gas or chemicals used by the ancients. No sounds are heard, but it smells snaky just the same. The whole underground installation gives one of shaky nerves the creeps. The gloom is like a weight on one's shoulders, and our flashlights and candles only make the darkness blacker. Imagination can reveal in conjectures and ungodly daydreams back through the ages that have elapsed till the mind reels dizzily in space. The idea of a grandiose Egyptian underground city has lived on in Arizona folklore, and the idea has been passed down by word of mouth for more than 100 years. The story has no basis in fact, however. The Smithsonian denies there was ever such an expedition. There is no record of a Kincaid or Professor Jordan working at the institution, and no one has ever found the supposed Egyptian underground city again. It appears the Arizona Gazette article was a simple fabrication, one of many the Frontier Press pulled in order to grab readers. Indeed, no less a literary figure than Mark Twain got his start in fiction, writing humorously bogus pieces for his brother's newspaper in the Nevada Territory. The idea of Egyptians coming to the New World has lived on, however. Numerous books and articles have been published asserting this claim, with many pointing to a superficial similarity between the Egyptian pyramids and those of the Aztec, Maya, and other Mesoamerican cultures. While it at first appears striking that such far-flung cultures would both have pyramids, a closer look reveals little to get excited about, because the pyramids of Egypt and Mesoamerica differ in both form and function. The Egyptian pyramids, except for the stepped pyramid of Saqqara, all have smooth sides, while those in Mesoamerica are stepped. The Egyptian pyramids are tombs with networks of tunnels inside or below them, while those in Mesoamerica are temples, although a few also had tombs, and are generally solid. Also, there is a wide disparity of dates. The oldest Mesoamerican pyramid is at La Venta in Tabasco, Mexico, which was built by the Olmec sometime between 1000 and 400 BCE. The last pyramids of Egypt were built in the 12th dynasty, 1991 to 1785 BCE, nearly 1,000 years earlier. There is also the problem of the lack of Egyptian artifacts in the New World. The supposed expedition to the Grand Canyon brought back nothing, and no genuine artifacts have been found anywhere in the New World since. There's also the question of why none of the useful Old World crops and animals, such as wheat, barley, cattle, chicken, and horses, have been found at New World sites. Some writers have claimed that ancient Egyptians may have traveled even further than Arizona. They suggest the Egyptians sailed down the east coast of Africa, across the Indian Ocean, and all the way to Australia. This remarkable claim comes from the discovery of a set of what appears to be hieroglyphs on a stone in Australia at Carryong, on the central coast of New South Wales. Called the Gosford Glyphs, they were first reported in the 1970s. They are a collection of almost 300 carvings on 2 flat walls of sandstone, and some of them do appear to be Egyptian hieroglyphs. A study by Australian Egyptologists, however, reached a different conclusion. Hieroglyphs changed a great deal over the long span of Egyptian civilization, and the Gosford glyphs incorporate signs spanning 2,000 years. An even bigger issue is that they don't say anything, meaning they give the appearance of having been carved by someone who had seen hieroglyphs but did not understand them. It is also odd that they would be on Australia's east coast, much farther away from Egypt than the west coast. As if that wasn't enough, sandstone, especially in coastal areas, erodes fairly quickly, and the carvings are clean, showing little sign of weathering. In contrast, some Aboriginal carvings dated to 250 years ago on another sandstone wall in the area are so eroded that they're barely visible. One Australian professor theorized that they were carved by a returning Australian soldier after World War I or World War II. Many Australian troops were stationed in Egypt, first to fight the Ottomans and then to fight the Germans and Italians. Perhaps a soldier's free Egyptian vacation inspired him to decorate some rocks when he got back home. This is documented to have happened at Ku-ring-gai National Park near Sydney, where a returning Anzac carved a sphinx and pyramids out of the local sandstone. Despite all evidence to the contrary, some local researchers still remain hopeful. They have made their own interpretation of the Gosford glyphs and have even found a third section of hieroglyphs plus a network of carved tunnels at the site. A Dutch chemist by the name of Dr. Renaud M. de Jong translated the carvings as followed. For His Highness the Prince, from this wretched place in this land, where we were carried by ship, engraved for the crown of Lower Egypt, according to God's word. My fellow Egyptians, call out from this place in this strange land for the god Suti. I, Nefer-Jeseb, son of Khufu, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, beloved by Ta, has brought the god Suti. The prince was kind and benevolent, follower of the sun god Ra. For 2 seasons, 8 months, he directed us eastward, weary, but strong to the end, always praying, joyful and smiting insects. He, the servant of God's aid, God, created the insects to protect his people. I myself am hardened, have gone around hills and deserts, in wind and rain, with no lakes at hand, blessed by the falling nights, when I hide myself completely out of reach. In our last camp, I cooked fowl on hand and brought rain, but hurt my back carrying the golden falcon standard, crossing hills, desert, and pools of water along the way. Plants are withering, land is dying. Is this our lot from the highest god of the sacred Mer? The sun is pouring down upon our back. O mighty Khepera, this is not what the oracle has said. Our hearts are overturned but not broken. This regal person, Nefer-Ti-Ru, came from the temple of God in Penu, Egypt. He came from the house of God. He was the son of Khufu, king of Upper and Lower Egypt. He who died before is here laid to rest. May he have life everlasting. He is never again to stand beside the waters of the sacred myrrh. Then clasp him, my brother's spirit, to thy side, O Father of the earth. The snake bit twice. We, followers of the divine King Khufu, mighty one of Lower Egypt, Lord of the two Adzes, we shall not all return. However, we have to continue. We cannot look back. All creek and river beds are dry, and we are dismayed. Our boats are tied up with rope. Death was caused by snake. We gave egg yolk from the medicine chest and prayed to Amun, the hidden one, for he was struck twice. It was a hard time for all of us, weeping over the dead body and keeping to the protocol. Seated all aside, our men watched the funeral with concern and deep love. How the mummified body was buried in the red earth section. Then we recovered ourselves. We walled in the side entrance to the chamber with stones from all around. The chamber was aligned with the western heavens. I counted and impounded the daggers of our men. The 3 doors of eternity were connected to the rear end of the royal tomb and sealed in. Young's convoluted translation has been spurned by academic circles. No accredited Egyptologist has been able to make any sense of the carvings, insisting that they are simply a random collection of symbols thrown together. Several have gone on record as having tried to translate them and said they were obviously carved by someone who did not know ancient Egyptian. The true believers counter this by saying the inscription is written in something called Proto-Egyptian, an archaic form that Egyptologists can't fully translate. Why amateurs can translate something Egyptologists could not is an open question. Another question one might ask is why this Proto-Egyptian would still be used in the time of Khufu, when hieroglyphs had already been in use for centuries. In addition, there are numerous symbols scattered around the sandstone surface that don't look like hieroglyphs at all. Supporters of the Gisford glyphs simply ignore these. Then there are the historical errors with the story itself. There are several surviving inscriptions listing Khufu's family, and neither prince in the translation is mentioned. Also, Gisebed is not an ancient Egyptian name or word, and Lord of the two Adzes was not an official title in ancient Egypt. These are just a few of the major errors found in the translation. Amusingly, the Gosford glyphs aren't the only purported ancient Egyptian artifacts in Australia, because the nation is also home to a pyramid. The Gympie Pyramid, as it is called, is a terraced hill with a roughly triangular profile in Queensland that some imaginative researchers claim was built by the Egyptians. Others say it is Inca or Chinese. The first proponent of the Egyptian pyramid hypothesis was writer Rex Gilroy, who has written numerous books on cryptozoology and UFOs. He claimed the pyramid was built by Egyptians who came to Australia to mine its rich mineral resources, even though there are equally rich mines far closer to home. A more prosaic explanation is that the terraces on the hill are, indeed, terraces that were built by early settlers farming the area. Several other, similarly dubious pyramids have been found in Australia, none of which have produced ancient Egyptian artifacts or writing. Another Egyptian pyramid is found in Bosnia. This region, at least, has the advantage of being a place the Egyptians could have conceivably visited. The Egyptians were part of an extensive trade network across the eastern Mediterranean, and while there is no evidence that Egyptian ships sailed directly to the Balkans, surely at least some individual Egyptians visited the various lands around the northeastern portion of the sea. There are hundreds of pyramid-shaped hills distributed in and around central Bosnia and Herzegovina, yet one in particular has achieved worldwide attention over the last decade. Found in the small town of Visoko, located about 30 kilometers northwest from Sarajevo, the hill is the tallest point in a landscape of tremendous historical importance for the country. The region has been occupied from prehistoric times. Rich in natural resources, the area was extensively quarried for metal ore and stone over many periods. In the medieval period, 12th to 15th centuries CE, this area became the center of the Kingdom of Bosnia. It was here that the first king of Bosnia, Vertko I, was crowned in 1373 CE. During this time, the large hill became known as Visocica, and a fortress was constructed upon its summit. From 1463, the Ottomans controlled them, and under their rule, many towns were founded, including Visoko, which experienced a surge of economic development and cultural activity, and became one of the richest towns in Bosnia. The town was of key importance in Bosnia's modern history, serving as a stronghold for Bosniak forces during the conflict in the 1990s. However, it is not for these reasons that the hill at Visocica is so well known today. Instead, the focus of attention has been on the controversial claim that it is the largest and oldest man-made pyramid to be found, not only in Europe, but the world. Since 2005, the Bosnian-born American businessman and self-proclaimed archaeologist Samir Osmanagic has promoted a controversial narrative of how and why the hill exists. He maintains that Visocica is not a natural feature, but was made by an ancient Bosniak civilization during the last ice age, between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. Its substructure is allegedly filled with an intricate network of passageways that connect it to other structures in the surrounding landscape built during the same time. If true, the scale of these pyramids would have required the largest construction works to have ever been performed in prehistory. But this theory has been fiercely criticized by archaeologists, geologists, pyramid experts, journalists, and countless other academics and non-academics. Many scientific specialists and laypersons have gone to Visoko to see the site with their own eyes, and reported that there is little evidence to suggest the validity of Samir's claims. Furthermore, some of the claims made of the pyramid are borderline science fiction, featuring everything from aliens to the mythical civilization of Atlantis. Through the use of popular and journalistic media, rather than academic channels, Mr. Osmanagic has garnered the attention of many hundreds of volunteers that come to Visoko each year. Conflicting accounts testify to what takes place. Is it legitimate archaeology being carried out, or the creation of a money-making theme park for tourists? Can the Bosnian pyramid be considered genuine, or is this but one example of widespread and pseudoscientific pyramid mania that occurs across the globe? Why do people believe in the fantastic stories woven around the Pyramid of the Sun? And why is the academic community so critical of this phenomenon? And who, exactly, is Samir Osmanagic, without whom this story would not exist? Geologists and archaeologists were not impressed by any of the theories. The geologists pointed out that the hills were natural formations called flatirons, formed when a steeply sloping stratum of rock overlays a strata of softer material. Indeed, hills of roughly pyramidal shape can be found in many regions. Plus, the hills do not form true pyramids as those made in Egypt. A look at the biggest pyramid with Google Earth View shows that only one side is roughly a pyramid shape, with the other side being much less geometric. Undaunted, Osmanagic has traced an entire civilization in the region, with a pyramid of the sun, a pyramid of the moon, a pyramid of love, a temple of earth, and a pyramid of the dragon. In response, the European Association of Archaeologists issued a declaration stating, "We, the undersigned professional archaeologists from all parts of Europe, wish to protest strongly at the continuing support by the Bosnian authorities for the so-called pyramid project being conducted on hills at and near Visoko. This scheme is a cruel hoax on an unsuspecting public and has no place in the world of genuine science. It is a waste of scarce resources that would be much better used in protecting the genuine archaeological heritage and is diverting attention from the pressing problems that are affecting professional archaeologists in Bosnia-Herzegovina on a daily basis. The hilltops were indeed used by ancient cultures. Visoko was a capital in the medieval period, and the ruins of a 14th century castle that served as the seat for Bosnia's kings was located on top of one of the largest of the pyramid hills. Roman and prehistoric sites as well as fossils have also been found on the hilltops. Much of this archaeological material has been swept away by Osmanagic's reworking of the hills. While some pseudoscientific researchers have suggested a link between the pyramids of Bosnia and Egypt, saying that Bosnia was a colony of the more famous civilization, Osmanagic and his team reject this idea. His theories have a distinctly nationalist flavor. Indeed, any Bosnian researcher who disputes him is often labeled anti-Bosnian. While Osmanagic posits an ancient Bosnian origin to his pyramids, he has gladly used the glamour of ancient Egypt to help his advertising. He brought Egyptian geologist Ali Abdullah Barakat, claiming Barakat was recommended by Zahi Hawass, then Egyptian Minister of State for Antiquities Affairs. Hawass denies any involvement and says that Barakat is neither an archaeologist nor an expert on pyramids. Barakat wrote a report saying that the Bosnian pyramids were natural hills sculpted into pyramid shapes. Other geologists, both Bosnian and international, refute this, saying the shape is entirely natural. The need for self-identity and money after their traumatizing experiences are certainly large driving factors in the Bosnian people's tolerance of the controversies associated with the Pyramid of the Sun. This takes place in a country that is very much still recovering from the genocidal war of the 1990s, and there is a strong need felt by communities across the Western Balkans to reinforce local and national identities. Today, the residents of Visoko are strong supporters of the Bosnian Nationalist Party, but Osmanagic says that the project, through its study of an ancient civilization separated from modern tensions and conflicts, is successfully unifying Croats, Serbs, Macedonians, and Bosnians in a constructive and friendly environment. Wellesley College anthropologist Philip Cole says that Osmanagic's pyramids exemplify the former Eastern Bloc in that, when the Iron Curtain collapsed, all these land and territorial claims came up, and people had just lost their ideological moorings. There's a great attraction in being able to say, we have great ancestors, we go back millennia, and we can claim these special places for ourselves. For these reasons, Osmanagic is treated with admiration, if not as a hero, by many in Visoko and the country who see his actions as a matter of ethnic and national pride. The pyramid nearby is very much embedded in the local community. Its symbol displayed on shop signs, motels, road signs, taxis, sugar packets, and coffee cups around town, and those working on the project are treated as minor celebrities by the locals. Some have claimed the energy and interest focused on the pseudo-archaeology of the Bosnian pyramids may one day be redirected into the rest of the country's heritage, and for this reason, Osmanagic's actions can be seen in a positive light. To look at this project with rose-tinted glasses, however, is a mistake, as the Bosnian pyramid scheme has produced a number of threats to the country's cultural heritage. Despite universal rejection by the scholarly community, the Bosnian pyramids are still a popular tourist attraction and have helped the economy of the struggling region. Local restaurants fill up with visitors wanting to eat local cuisine on pyramid-shaped plates, and shops sell t-shirts and Osmanagic's books to the thousands of people who pass through. Meanwhile, there is no solid evidence that the ancient Egyptians ever traveled such long distances. Their ships were made for hugging the coast, not crossing the vast Atlantic Ocean. The theories that the Egyptians reached Arizona or Australia say more about the enduring fascination with this great ancient civilization than it does about what actually happened thousands of years ago. An Etruscan mummy? Egypt conducted extensive travel throughout the Mediterranean, especially the eastern half. The land of the Nile had much to offer, and Egyptian artifacts have been found all around the coastal regions of the sea. However, foreign artifacts in Egypt are sparse, a sign that the Egyptians were culturally conservative and preferred their own art forms to those of foreign lands. They mainly imported raw materials, such as metals and Lebanese cedar. Nonetheless, researchers occasionally turn up something unusual. In the mid-19th century, a Croatian traveler named Mihailo Baric visited Egypt and bought a late-period sarcophagus with a female mummy inside as a gift for his wife. While perhaps not the most romantic memento to give a loved one, this was actually quite a common practice in the days before antiquities laws. Once he got home, Baric propped it up in his living room, removing some of the outer bandages so the dried-up woman could be more clearly seen. The linen was placed in a separate glass case. After Baric and his wife died, the mummy and wrappings passed to his brother, who donated it to the National Museum of Slovenia and Dalmatia, now known as the Archaeological Museum in Zagreb. Scholars there noticed that the outer linen wrappings that Baric had removed were covered with some sort of writing divided by 12 vertical columns into sections, and that folds in the linen showed that it had been folded along these columns, creating an effect much like the pages in a book. The inscription remained untranslated for many years. It was assumed to be Demotic, a simpler form of writing than hieratic. Hieratic is the form of language people generally associate with ancient Egyptian writing, full of pictures of birds and hands and other objects in geometric shapes. Demotic is made up of squiggly characters that have only a vague resemblance to their original hieratic forms, and at first glances looks like Arabic written by a rather messy hand. Another idea was that the writing was Coptic, the language of the Egyptian Christians. Their language is derived from ancient Egyptian, and the writing is a blend of Greek letters and Demotic. It wasn't until 1891 that the truth was revealed. A Viennese expert in the Coptic language named Jacob Krall studied the text and found that it was actually Etruscan. The Etruscans were the predecessors of the Romans, controlling much of Italy from 900 to 27 BCE, when the last Etruscan holdouts were taken over by the expanding power of Rome. From the moment the language was identified, people wondered why a mummy was buried in an ancient Egyptian tomb in the Egyptian manner with an Etruscan book. Unfortunately, the book, known as the Liber Lintius Zagrebinius, Zagreb Linen Book, wasn't much help, because Etruscan is a lost language. Few inscriptions remained, and these are generally short. In fact, at 1,200 words, the Liber Lintius Zagrebinius is the longest piece of Etruscan text ever found, and nobody can fully read it. Further investigation revealed that the woman was in fact Egyptian, not Etruscan, and that a papyrus found in her tomb that had ended up in another location stated her name as Nessi Hensu, the wife of a tailor at Thebes. There have been advances in Etruscan studies in recent decades, and now some of the texts can be puzzled out. The names of various gods and goddesses are known, as well as some important words. With this, scholars have found that the Liber Lintius Zagrebinius is some sort of liturgical calendar. The deities mentioned were mostly local ones, worshipped in the region around Lake Trasimeno, about 110 miles north of Rome. So why was an Egyptian woman married to an Egyptian man buried in the Egyptian manner with an Etruscan religious calendar placed on her chest? Was her husband an Etruscan immigrant who took on an Egyptian name?